Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank my colleagues from the previous session who have left the floor for us. I am Patrizia Bolzan, Research Fellow and Postdoc at the Department of Design. I'm a part also of the Polifactory Research Group, and that is the reason why I'm here with Massimo Menichinelli. Hi, Massimo.
Hi, Patrizia.
Let me just briefly introduce you. Massimo is a research fellow at RMIT University and recently is also senior resident researcher at Polifactory. So welcome, Massimo, from me and the audience of this session. Massimo, you started your research journey about 15 years ago, exploring emerging and frontier themes in relation to the field of design. I'm referring to the connection carried by the maker movement with its propensity toward openness of processes, tools, results, and to the spontaneous constitution of a distributed, diffuse, and decentralized network. And it is precisely the concept of the social network that you have investigated in depth that is able to provide interesting insights. So, in this moment, we are during the conversation. In our conversation of these 24 hours, we are discussing around the theme of uncertainty. Uncertainty is a condition that we are all experiencing directly, but designers should read and interpret perhaps before others in order to respond quickly to social, economic, and environmental changes. So the first question that I want to share with you is, starting from your experiences and reflection, how and through which strategy would it be possible to support the path of designers and design researchers?
Hi, Patrizia, and hello, everybody everywhere. Yeah, there are several strategies approaches. Let's say there are at least 3 that are relevant here. One is focusing on social networks, and then on impact, and then on meta design. Social networks, because, well, this is something that has been developed even forward in the last decades. We think we're going through the phase where what is a social network is Facebook, but actually we are increasingly understanding that actually it's a way for understanding how social interactions are structured and how they also give place to processes or organizations. And they're also a way for going past, ideal models. So what would be a distributed system to actually what is a distributed system in reality? From, well, everybody's potentially connected to who is really connected, who's more connected than others, and who's more influencing than others, the whole processes. And it's a good way also for really understanding the social dimensions of where we work and what we work on and how we impact. And so then we move to impact. And this again is another topic that is gaining momentum in the last year. So it's the idea of understanding what is the impact of any initiative. Traditionally, this started more with policies and projects, like very big projects, like infrastructure, energy, and power plants. But it's increasingly moving towards also, like, let's say, individuals. On one side to social innovation and, for example, also impact investing. But I think it's also getting closer to also designers, both individually and citizen as a person. So the ideas of impact is basically understanding what is the change are we actually implementing in reality, in society, in the environment, in the economy, with our initiatives. So this is quite interesting, not just for stakeholders and policymakers and entrepreneurs, but also for designers, considering that we can say that very broadly, design is about creating change, implementing change, and an ideal change that we would like to achieve. So it's a good way for planning already which kind of change we would like to get and how to get there, and especially if we reach it and how. So this is also a part, if you want, of the idea of meta design, the idea that designers can not just design, but also design their own tools, processes, organizations, approaches. There are at least 3 main family, let's say historically, working on meta design. One is more about design as a systemic practice. So it's more about complex systems and holistic views. Another one is more about how designers can understand their practice and improve it, and have an active voice in understanding how the practice is shaped also by clients, customers, and external stakeholders. And another one is more meta design as creating environments, digital environments, and physical tools, processes, and organization. Generally, it's more about the idea of being aware of what we do and who we are as designers, because the more we are aware of that, the better we can reorient what we do and face this uncertainty. And this is basically finding a way to address uncertainty by basically understanding what are the social structure where we are moving, what is our practice, changing, and basically how we can reorient this, understanding this, and create new tools and new approaches for doing this.
Okay, so during your talk, you emphasized the importance of the role of meta design, both as an approach and as a tool to better understand the functioning and positioning of multiple actors in the social networks. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Well, first side is basically moving away from the idea that, well, we design with a community, and this community has no dimension at all. It's like we design in a point. In Flatland, there will be a point. In those dimension, we are happy because there is nothing, but really that we don't understand what's going on and what's our impact. So there are different, of course, layers and different kind of complexity in a community or in any kind of social system. So or we try to get all of them, and then it will be very, very complex. It will be the full territory, or we design maps that are, simplification, some sort of way for navigating this complexity, and also then understanding how to act. And that's again also design action. So this is normally what is done when social network analysis is done. Is the idea, okay, we find a representation that is constructed, is interpreted. So there could be multiple, but we try to find the simplest way that is actually good for understanding how we can interact with the people and the systems. And so trying to understand already what is the context where we are. It's not just a research activity, it's already a design activity, because we are not just analyzing, we are creating a design artifact, which is basically a map. And this is very useful because normally we think, well, we're going to design for somebody and so on, but it's somebody external where, it's in another world, and we are not really interactive. It's not just for doing the design, at least for the handover at the end of the design process, if not with some co-design workshops with post-its and all of these kind of things. But in one way or another, we are interacting with another system, in another world, and sometimes we are also part of it. And if you're not part of it, we are becoming part of it somehow. And this is not something that is just an issue for researchers to try to understand what is their impact in the research they're doing and if they're influencing the results. It's really also for practitioners. This is one of the things that comes with having more awareness with meta design, but it's also where we're moving as professionals. So it's very important to understand in any project that we do, basically where we are in the project, in the interaction that we create and how we influence, and what is our role as a first step. If we do a network analysis of the social interaction, then we can understand who are the more active actors, the less active, the one that doesn't interact at all. And we can find that there are a group of people that don't interact. Some they interact, but not a lot. Some that they are the expected people to be more active, they're actually not the main ones. And we can also understand where we are as designers. And this is very good for understanding, not just at the end, but through all the practice. Basically, what is our role if we are really doing what we would like to do and achieving what we would like to achieve. It's a way for trying to understand really where we are going on the map. The map says we're going from A to B, and the map itself is a representation of the interactions. And the idea is basically to keep checking what's happening on the map and see if we really are going from A to B and if you're doing in the ways that we would like to do that are acceptable and desirable. And this, again, say it's more a meta design because it's not the design practice itself. And it's not just research, but it's really a way for being really aware of what we are doing in design practice. So on one side is we design tools. It will be this kind of network maps. We are design processes because, again, with meta design, we're increasingly designing processes. It's not something that we just experience informally and we don't know what is happening, but we are more and more designing the processes. And so we can reorient them. And then also we can basically understand and organize the organization that are emerging from the interactions in the processes. So this is part that are increasingly being added to meta design as an approach for understanding what we do. And one thing that probably is also I would like to suggest, and this is open for discussion, but many times meta design maybe is overlapping with design management. My suggestion is like, how do we see this design management? If it's more from a management standpoint, yes, it's a part of management. But if it's from a design standpoint, from a design culture, I would say that it probably falls into meta design. Again, it's a broad idea of us as designers. We understand more what we do and who we are, and basically how we can change what we do and we are, and then the final impact.
I understand your idea of meta design. It's wider than the usual that we discuss in these places usually. Yes, it's really interesting, your point of view. And I don't know if you want to emphasize other part strictly connected to the idea of in which way meta design can affect the social networks that you previously talked about, and if you want to explore again this idea.
Well, one way, for example, if you want to see what's happening, is thinking as a process, even as a movie, and we take a screenshot and a certain step, and then we see what's happening over there. This is a common practice in network analysis, to find some snapshot in time and then see what's happening over there, because it's something that is continuous. And so, of course, having some tools that make this a bit more automatic way, or maybe something that is less cumbersome, but we can continuously check, it's useful. But one thing that I think it's important is not just saying where single individuals are in this network, which is one important thing, but it's also how community are shaped. And not just our community shaped, but also which kind of dynamics they behave. They create, and all these complex phenomena and qualities that emerge from the interaction of single individuals that you don't get at individual level. So finding communities networks is actually more complex than it seems, because you don't find one community. It depends on which algorithms you use, and especially at which scale and granularity you want to go. So you can find bigger and smaller community, but it's useful to check and see really also who we think should be in a community, but actually is not, and which are the boundaries on community. This, again, is connected with uncertainty, because typically in social networks, you don't have sometimes very clear-cut way of finding these borders, because, again, one algorithm or one granularity will give you one thing, one result, and one another, but it's very good for understanding how these very fluid systems are moving forward. And it's important to understand that if you're part of one community or another, even in the same project, or even with the same community of people, in the same different clusters, there are different ways of doing things and seeing things. So, for example, one thing that I think is important that I just hinted before is I say that as designer, when we work with whoever is customer or communities or stakeholders or participants, we're having like two different worlds, or if not more than two different worlds, coming together. And one thing, for example, that I'm working on in research is going a bit deeper from in the path of from user-centered design to participatory design and co-design. So that very, very briefly, the history goes: in user-centered design, we check what users are doing in terms of tasks and activities. Then, of course, it's limited, so we move to emotions and experience with experience design. then of course it's difficult to understand all the deeper emotion of people. So that's why we moved to co-design, saying basically let's involve them in a process that will deal with their emotion and experience, and we will have a direct approach. But I'm also trying to go to a deeper level. That is basically in the idea of worldview. Since we are having different words coming together, what is the different worldview? Worldview in English, Weltanschauung in German, is the idea, is not just in terms of great narrative, what is the vision that you have about economy, politics, and religion, but really about a lot of different things. In meta design, at least, there is one element that is very important, and it's especially when we talk about design processes. These are intangible. We all experience them, but we look at them through our different experiences and culture. So even if we try to design the same design processes with different people in an open way, which is what we've been doing, the different way of seeing at this, can really change everything. I've seen people that see processes as something organic, something more mechanics as gears. So there are different ways of perceiving times and process. So it's very important to understand this thing of the worldviews. And the worldviews, again, is not just something that happens when you go and work with a different culture. It's extremely important with that. And I see myself, trying to work about processes in other countries, especially in Asia, where the worldview really changed the way these are seen. But really, even in the same country or in the same city, you can understand the different way people see and work at the projects. And this is not just something that is normally articulated. It's something that is more internal, but it's important to try to understand how, also the experiences and everything is perceived. Here we go a bit deeper also in terms of design research, in terms of what is called ontology, which has several meanings, actually. At least it has two meanings in computer science and in basically in philosophy and human science, which are similar, but actually very important for design, especially designing with digital artifacts and also designing learning through digital culture at the same time. So ontology for computer science is the structure of a database, how data is organized and how all the elements are connected. In philosophy,
just one thing, because yes, it's really interesting, because also the last time we talked about your research, you touched the ontology theme. So yes, we're in a conversation, and this is the happy hour, and certain words can seem difficult, complex, maybe it's more popular misconception, but yes, if you can help us to understand better, but in a colloquial way, what you mean when you talk about ontology, it's really important, I think, in this moment.
I thought that the forbidden word will be design thinking. I didn't know it will be also ontology. No, this is important, of course, because it has different meanings and it's slowly becoming part of design. So again, one is computer science, so anytime we design any digital artifact, is how we structure data. But how we structure data is not just the structure of database, but how do we see how entities in the domain we are moving in are organized. It's the structure of things, which is it's very connected to what actually is in philosophy and human science, which is, again, if you want, is the worldview, is basically how do we see how reality is actually structured. They're similar, they're connected, actually, in what is the human worldview shapes what is basically the structure of the data. The important thing, the ontology in a database is an artifact. It's something that we design. And this brings to another meaning, which is ontological design, which is the idea that, in design, we design tools, we give shape to tools that they give shape to us in exchange, because whatever we create, in any case, influence also us. And again, it goes more in the idea of meta design as awareness, self-awareness of what we do and how to improve whatever you do for, generally our human condition. But it's very important because it gives a bit more of understanding at a deeper level of what we can do. So on one side could be at least understanding what is the worldview of people we work with. Another be how to structure digital tools, or in any case, any tools that has some information. Even a design canvas has some information, or is designed in a way that it stores some information. So it's a form. So basically it's a database. So it could be another way for doing that. And also consider that in meta design, if we create tools that work with design processes on tools, they're also creating an ontology of design, and there are different ways for seeing this and doing an ontology of design. So it's important to understand that whatever we do in terms of designing artifacts, information, and so on, is not something that we do because the best practice says to do things in this way. It depends on where we are and what we do. It's important, especially in digital platform, because this is very clear, at least for researchers, that these tools, they're not neutral. They have some embedded social, political, economical values that they shapes everything that then we do. It was clear to software developers and hackers some decades ago. It's increasingly clear now if you see what can be done one platform, one social network, and one can be doing another. But it's increasingly part of what we design and what we can do or we cannot do. So it's important to start to get an idea of really what is view of people, but also how we can shape what they can do. And in order that we are not pushing just one way of doing things everywhere, but we try to have different approaches, in a more collaborative way.
Yeah, I think you painted a very good picture of how everything is connected, how everything creates multiple interconnection, and this connection could constitute the networks, different kind of networks that are that push the other networks and change everything in a continuous way. But in this moment, we are in the final 10 minutes of our slot. So in the first part of your contribution, you talk about also impact. And I want to ask you if you have to give an advice from your reflection, talking also about impact, what would it be?
Well, as a general conclusion, there could be several advices. First thing is how to deal with uncertainty.
We accept several advices, not only one, of course, okay. Don't worry.
Besides adding ontology to the forbidden words? No, of course, that not. And well, in general, of course, there is always some anxiety to be dealt with. And there is always the idea, you always read paper starting, there are so many changes, so much now. Things before that were so normal, so easygoing. That's something that you can read even if you go up in centuries and ancient Rome. You see philosophers complaining about young people. But really, there are several changes. I mean, we went through some decades of stability after World War II, and now in the last decades, a lot of things have been changing. I think it's at least the third time that I've heard that the sentence, "This is a crisis that you can see only once in your lifetime," after 9/11, Great Recession, and this pandemic. So I'm not sure if I've lived 3 lifetimes. Let's see what are the next one. So for sure, there are a lot of things changing. Let's say at least in the design profession, for sure, there are changes because, well, industrial and post-industrial society is changing. One important thing is that it should be thought that it's not something that is not a positive, it's bad. It's a good thing, actually, that we have some room for change and improvement. I would say one important thing for meta design is that we have tools and approaches for actually recreating what we want to do and who we want to be. Again, it's the idea of being self-aware of what we are, who we are, and then we'll actually have a bit more of the tools for navigating this complexity and certainty. So again, it's a lot about making maps of where we are going and updating them and changing things. And this really, if we take this as a different approach and a different way of seeing things, actually makes things easier. So uncertainty has been dealt in different way in different disciplines. So if you think even, I don't know, in the physics in the 19th century by adding probability, so something that should be something very precise, suddenly added to deal with something that is probable more than something that is exact, and of course was difficult for understanding. But it is good that the more we learn about this, and that they have part of social contexts are quite fuzzy and ever changing, and actually we can shape ourselves in this social context and the social context, we understand we can do much more than we think. And this, of course, in the end brings to the impact. It's not just who we are, but also where we are in what we do, because if we have a negative impact for a while, then we will not be working anymore, most likely. And I think it's important, again, to understand that really we are moving even further to design as sense making. There are still designers for giving, of course, but we move even further into what it means sense making, and understanding what could be an impact. Understanding how to integrate the creation of theory of changes for an initiative. It's a design activity. It's more as a meta design activity, because we are trying from the start to understand really what do we want to do, what we want to achieve, and find a way to go there. And another important thing is also, I've seen recently that the issue of time, and especially future, but not only issue of time in design, is increasingly more popular and important. And all the approaches about foresight, futuring, design fiction, and so on, that have been around for a while, but are increasingly popular by practitioners as well, not just by researchers. So this is actually a very good thing to notice now. It's an important thing that we shouldn't forget what is about design, that really more is about the future, and it's implementing change in the future. And if we read in the literature about impact assessment, first thing they say, this is about the future as well. Because if you want to see what is the impact in the past, well, you should reconstruct what was the situation and what we wanted to achieve in the past. So again, this is really important. Whatever we do, we need to understand really where we are, what is the baseline, where we want to go, and how to assess that. And again, there is not one single way. There is not one theory of change for everything. There are different ways of doing that. It's something that we design. So that's why I say this is part of the meta design approach.
So I'm very, very happy that from your point of view, design is becoming more popular and important, because this is the right moment. But referring to that, tell us something that is difficult to accomplish for design, or for designer, or for research designers, but that you think it's a priority in this moment in 3 minutes. So it's an easy question,
One important thing that I realized, by being a researcher myself, having done a doctorate and so on, that it's very difficult to research, especially in the first years, but it's very enriching. And one probably of the most difficult things is really this part of self-awareness and basically creating a path in a lot of certainty. But then after a while you get used to, and it's basically whatever you do, and everything you see in real life, actually you apply the same approach and analysis, and you understand much better how social interactions are shaped and how your actions actually create a change. So at least this is happening to me. But this is something that it should be not just for research, but increasingly more part of the practice, and understanding this. That is something that is not very difficult, but even in a simple way actually adds more. And normally say, knowing something that is 20% probable is much better than not knowing anything, or knowing that you don't know anything at all for something. Because again, the important thing for design is not that you will want to discover what is true in reality, create the new universal laws, but creating some change in a specific context. So the important thing is basically finding knowledge, creating the maps for implementing the change that we want in the local context where we are, but also assessing the impact that we have to check if the assumptions were good, if the maps were good, and also our actions were good.
So change starts from what is close to us, I think, right? I think your conversation, it's really inspiring, and I'm really, really happy to see you during these 24 hours. And I want to thank you very much again, because you share with us all your knowledge in a small pillow, but it's really important for us. And I think this is the moment to leave the floor to Alessandra Spagnoli and her guest. And see you again, Massimo.